Hey everybody, what's happening? Welcome to Let's Play Majerus G3, Episode 5, Atomic Kittens. This is, of course, the series where we're taking a look at the recently restored laptop and virtual studio of late contemporary artist Michel Majerus. If you're new to the series, please check out Episode 1, which is going to be on my timeline somewhere. That's going to bring you up to speed on the project, like what we're doing here. Then afterwards, obviously, 2, 3, and Episode 4 are there for you. And while you're at it, please hit like, please hit subscribe, please ring that bell. And here we go. So today we have an amazing episode for you. It's actually our final episode. And we're going to be taking a look at one of the last shows that Majerus was working on. And, I don't want to spoil it to you, but there is something to do with Atomic Kitten, the band. So normally we'd go right into housekeeping, but actually in honor of Dragan Espenschied, our guest on episode 4, Dragan had mentioned how much he loves to see the computer boot up. So we're going to boot up the computer in this episode. And yeah, actually, that's why I'm a little distracted. It's a little tricky with the timing, so bear with me. All right, there we go. The computer is booting up. Let's launch right into housekeeping. So we need to do housekeeping for episode 3 and 4. So let's start with episode 3. In regards to that, at Kate Shepard 9074 asks on YouTube, what does quote unquote in the style of Warhol mean in terms of printing technique? Thanks. Thank you, Kate. And actually, this was a question that I got in a couple different inboxes of mine. I was being inundated, DM'd, spammed, commented on. So thank you, Kate. Thanks for everyone who was sending in this particular question. Sometimes I forget that with Warhol, because I've spent so much time with his work, sometimes I forget that people have no idea what I'm talking about. But so in episode 3, I was speaking of the 2 Space Invader paintings that Majerus was showed in the Friedrich Petzel show, and I said that they're in the style of Warhol. And what I mean is, if you look at some of the early Warhol silkscreen paintings, especially the ones where there's a one motif repeated. So I would think like some of the double and triple Elvises, the car crashes, things like that. You'll notice that as the image is repeated and it's silk screened, it's not done the same way each time. So sometimes the image is silk screened, there's too much ink, sometimes there's not enough ink. And so it's actually quite quote unquote sloppy in terms of silkscreen technique. But it's kind of one of the things that makes the work. And so this sloppiness is kind of what I was referring to. So if you take a look at the 2 Space Invader paintings in the Petzel show that Majerus showed, you'll notice that the iconography of the Space Invaders and my phone is on. Hold on. Thought I silenced that. Okay. Blown up all over the place. So you'll notice that the iconography is not consistently silkscreen, and that's kind of in the style of Warhol. So thank you, Kate. And episode 4, our housekeeping is actually more of a kind of thought daydream thread that I had after the episode. So Dragan had mentioned the project 1 terabyte of kilobyte age. So this is, of course, Dragan Espenschied, who is the guest on episode 4. And this is a project he did with Olia Lialina. And after that episode, I was thinking, just to myself, I was why do I like that project so much? And I was it's an archive, in that case, GeoCities. And it's been republished in a contemporary format. And in their case, it was a bot on Tumblr, which is republishing this material. And I was thinking, yeah, I really, really love that. And then I thought, this is kind of what this project is doing. And then I had the kind of duh moment. I was oh yeah, actually this project is inspired by that project. So I just wanted to like take just like re-up, or what do you call it? Retweet or whatever. Take a look at that project, 1 terabyte of kilobyte age. It's really an amazing project, and this project wouldn't exist without that. And then I was like daydreaming even further. I was thinking, yeah, and in episode 1 we also mentioned Pauline Oliveros, and I was thinking Olia and Pauline are these kind of parallel figures, both kind of like created or helped create the genre that they work in, like Pauline with experimental music, Olia with network-based art. And I just went on this kind of daydream. And so this, like, in conclusion for this housekeeping, take a look at 1 terabyte of kilobyte age, and also take a second to check out Olia, Lialina, and Pauline Oliveros. Pauline, she taught telepresence in the class that I was in of hers. And like, I think, Olia and Dragan's project, this project wouldn't exist without those people's work in my life. So anyway, just a bit of, just a shout out, I guess. Okay, so let's jump into this final episode. What we're going to be looking at today, actually, before I get there, let's talk about final episode. So it's definitely not the final episode in terms of like material. It's just the lack of episode. It's not the last episode for lack of material. It's the last episode just because it was a kind of narrative arc that I envisioned when I planned this series about a year ago. And of course, this laptop into the future will be available for other researchers and historians, and they, I'm sure, will have interesting and takes that I couldn't come up with. So last episode, it's going to be a little bit shorter, and what we're going to do is, as I click through the material, I'm actually not going to yap. I think I've yapped for hours in this series so far, so I'm going to be quiet, and I'll come back to you at the end. What is the material, you're asking? Well, today we're going to look at a working folder for a show that Majerus was working on at the time of his, tragic and untimely passing for the Tate Liverpool. And so we're going to be clicking through the working files, and we even will see some sketches of what maybe the show could have looked like. Which is amazing. And so this folder is very similar to the folder that we saw in episode 3 for the Petzl show. So this is kind of a folder where a lot of the work for this show was happening. I'm not going to click through it chronologically. I'm going to click through it in a kind of narrative, and I won't click on every file, but I'll click on files that kind of bring us to these amazing sketches. And just to talk a little bit about the show, quote unquote, project space is Tate's dedicated space for presenting emerging and recently established international artists. It presents the work of artists who have been specially commissioned by Tate Liverpool to make work for the ground floor gallery. So that's text actually from the early 2000s. And for those who are tuned into Majerus' CV, this Tate show and a related show at the Hamburger Bahnhof did happen after his passing, but in a different configuration than the sketches we'll see in a little bit. I mean, it was titled Michel Majerus Pop Reloaded, according to the joint catalog of the Hamburger Bahnhof and Tate Liverpool. Okay, so before I start clicking, and here's the folder here, and let me just open it. I want to just point out 3 things maybe to keep an eye on as I click through these files. One is the relationship between IRL and like the flow from IRL to fine art. So we see like Majerus take things from the world, and they go through this kind of like mystical process, and they kind of end up in his work. So that's one thing. The relationship between man and machine. So something else we talked about in this series. And the fun thing about Majerus is actually, you could argue it's reversed, where he is the machine and the computer, or like the digital process, is the human. Meaning a lot of the kind of improvisation tends to happen in the computer before these artworks get rendered by Majerus, and that's something we saw in episode 2 with the pressure group series. And the third thing is this kind of yin-yang between like improvisation and rendering or meticulousness. So before I started this series, I just assumed he was like a kind of improvisatory artist. Things happened like very quickly, like in front of the canvas. But it turns out actually what we see with a lot of the material on this laptop is he's a meticulous, down to the millimeter planner. And that is really still kind of a surprise to me. So it's very amazing. So just keep those three things in mind. It's not homework. So if you want to keep other things in mind, that's obviously fine. It's art. Everything is fine. Okay. So here we go. I'm going to click, relax, put your feet up, and I'll come back to you in, 10 minutes, 10 minutes as we finish, and I'll have some concluding thoughts. Amazing. So there are two main questions that I've been getting about this project. The first is, what do you think he would be doing today? Like with the internet and the emergence of the kind of digital world that we all live in, what kind of work would he be making today? And first, I have to offer a caveat to this kind of question. It's not possible to compare eras. So we could think of chess, for example. A common thought experiment in chess is like, well, what would happen if Magnus Carlsen played Bobby Fischer? Bobby Fischer, chess champion in the, well, I'm not sure if it's 70s or 80s, but let's say days of yore. Magnus Carlsen is the current best chess player. And he's Norwegian, by the way. And what would happen is Magnus Carlsen would annihilate Bobby Fischer. And not only Magnus Carlsen, but like the top 50 chess players today would just destroy Bobby Fischer. And it's because, chess is cumulative and knowledge is cumulative and culture is cumulative. So it's not a parallel relationship. Another example, which is more related to the question I get, is a common thought experiment in video art. And the question is, wouldn't video artists of the early days of video art, wouldn't they be so happy today with that we all have like a video editing suite in our phone? Isn't that their dream fulfilled? And so if you know a little bit about early video artists, a lot of what those artists were fighting for was access to make video, access to cameras, to editing equipment, and to broadcast opportunities. And you could say, well, yeah, with TikTok and YouTube, all those kind of needs were met eventually. And that would be the kind of the two eras would line up parallel. But actually, if you think about it, like, there's nothing kind of like more powerless than uploading a video to TikTok today. So like, even though you have access, actually you don't really have access to like media flows. And so maybe what they were actually interested in was access to the media flows, or the power of the media flows, broadcast, for example. And so anyway, things get confusing when you start trying to make these parallels between eras. So I have no idea what he would be doing today. Though what we can see in these last few shows is that there was this kind of move to like more digital rendering and digital work and kind of digital space. So perhaps that would have continued. The second kind of question I get is, like, what have you learned doing this project? And do you feel like through what you've learned, like, you know him better? And this actually, like, the answer to this is a kind of surprise even to myself. Like, I feel like, well, I've learned like a lot, but I actually feel like I know him like less. Like, somehow I'm not able to say, well, this is what he was doing and this is how he did it. In fact, the whole thing is even like a bigger mystery to me. And it's kind of amazing because in this series, we've gotten so close to some of the works. Like, we could literally see the works happening as if we are standing in the studio with him. And in, one of the episodes, we are like literally see him painting while he's like carrying on a conversation. And yeah, you would think that would illuminate it, but actually just makes the whole thing more mystical. Like, how did he know? The questions still aren't answered, and it just makes, you're just like, wow, like from this file to that file, this amazing thing happened. And actually there's something that happened in this episode, which I think like exemplifies this really well. Like, if you noticed, he was working with this, and you could see it here, this blue photograph of the band Atomic Kitten. And First thing is like, well, how did he know how to make it blue? How did he know how to put this bar on the bottom and the right side? And then the most amazing part, if you notice, like at some point, he kind of sketches up the work in his computer, and then he renders the work in his studio on the wall as if it's leaning up against the wall. So it's like, of course, one thing to render work in the computer and then see what it looks like in exhibition, like we saw with the Petzl show and like we see here. But it's like a whole entirely other thing to render a work in the computer and then, or make a work in the computer and then render it like what it looks like in the studio. So it's like he's like a studio artist, but the studio is totally virtual in the computer, but it's actually like a photograph of an actual studio. It's totally mind-blowing. It's like double recursive. And so things like this leave me completely awed and, inspired, floored, speechless. As you can see, I can't really explain it here. And that, of course, is the thing with art, people always come up to me and say, well, I don't get it. Like, I don't get contemporary art. And I just say, yeah, like, I don't get it either. It is, at its best, it is ungettable. That's why I'm in this game. And definitely Majerus is one of the best to ever do it. So yeah, that's where I want to leave you. It's been such an honor to be able to do this project. So thank you, everybody who was involved and the viewers. And so thank you to the estate and by extension, the Majerus family. Thanks to Norge Riemschneider and Matthew Marks Galleries, who represent the work of Michel Majerus. Thank you to Rhizome, who was the preservation partner on this project. And of course, all the people that work at all these places. Thank you, everyone who is viewing and who chimed in with your enthusiasm and your questions. It's been an amazing ride. It's been so inspiring. What a trip. So thanks again. And I'll see you when I see you. Later.